Here we go. So this is the very first edition of the Ice Bath podcast, and I'm delighted to have my good friend Mark Varacchi with me today. Thank you for coming on and having faith in the ice bath and intellect and all that sort of stuff. And
Colin, it's my pleasure.
thank you very much. And for anybody that doesn't know Mark, you must follow him on LinkedIn. He gave me great insights when we were developing Investigation Engine. And what I'm doing is a quick summary, and I know Mark will add to this later on. A seasoned hedge fund, CCO, COO, CEO, you've spent your career meticulously creating, evaluating, and identifying flaws in systems, processes, and software. So go back to what we said about Investigation Engine, the perfect guy to look at it for me. 20 years of experience in the hedge fund and private equity industry. In 2017, and this is we got talking as a result of this. I saw something, and you sort of connected with me and started chatting away about things. So in 2017, you were charged with securities fraud. You took full responsibility for your actions and worked with government to make restitution. You did 15 months in federal prison. We don't. We're in the UK just one prison system, and I know it's slightly different in the US. Um, and you come out, you reevaluated your priorities. And you're now the founder of the Federal Prison Consultancy, which I think is a great cause, preparing clients and their families for incarceration, something that is sadly lacking in the UK. You are academically well qualified, a Bachelor of Science in Finance, and you now speak to the audience that I speak to, compliance and financial professionals, about fraud, compliance, and ethics. And that whole perspective comes from hands-on experience not only with systems, but also because of what happened, circumventing certain systems, which you're probably going to talk about a little bit more. Um, and you know your stuff around AML and KYC processes, which again is of interest to my audience. So your journey allowed you to master both the construction and exploitation of financial systems. Is that right? Is that a fair summary?
That, that, that is correct. You made me sound much, much better than the not so better part of my life. And I uh, I feel fortunate to have gotten together with you.
Likewise.
It's not often that I get to um, hands-on directly use. I always feel like I'm never going to get away from the bad things I did. All I can do is focus that energy to do good things with
Yeah.
those things. And
Yeah.
this is one of those opportunities that I've had in order to evaluate a system that in certain ways is really the kind of front line of defense
Yeah.
for compliance, and to kind of understand what the mentality is from someone who maybe has bad intentions. I can still reach that side of my brain just fine. So it works out. It's I don't I don't turn it on for any normal reasons, but the idea is I can tell you what I would be thinking, and when I walk in a room from any type of compliance consulting perspective, I usually walk in saying, how would I steal or circumvent what's going on here? And
Yeah.
then I reverse engineer, where people who are Boy Scouts from day one
Yeah.
sometimes don't have that part of their
No.
brain. And I think the best in whether you talk about detectives or you talk about compliance, whether it's Clarence Darrow or whether it's Sherlock Holmes, they all were able to turn on the bad side of their brain and say,
Yeah.
what would I do if I was doing bad things?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I often, and with my background in the police, you would often sort of talk about you've got to think like a criminal. Now, that can be quite difficult for people unless you've actually either been one or you're dealing with it day to day. And people just think in a different way, don't they?
I call it a premeditated multiple personality disorder.
Mm.
You just have to be able to create it and then be able to kind of
And well,
let it go. But I find people that do that have have more success, not kind of poo-pooing
yeah,
people who have been good their whole life. I think that's obviously commendable.
yeah,
I'm just simply looking at it saying it gives you a gives you a different perspective when walking into a room where it's you don't have to make the data you don't have to interpret the data and then find it. The idea is you create it and then
Mm.
go see if the data matches what you would do,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, 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 and it's just fantastic insight, and anybody who's listening to this is very lucky to get that insight because you're not going to get it in a day-to-day environment, are you? Um, so what I want to do is just pose some questions to you because you're going to bring that additional perspective to anybody listening that isn't available. And I think one of the things I wanted, we use the term red flags a lot in compliance, uh, and I think it probably will have different meanings to different people. But what red flags did you notice in your own operations that were consistently overlooked by either management, compliance teams, regulators? And I suppose in some ways you might describe that as an open door.
Sure. And what I will say is when I noticed these things, I wasn't necessarily doing bad things at that time.
Yeah,
But later on, when the opportunity, not the opportunity, but when the situation came up
yeah,
and it was making those decisions, it was things that I had seen in the past where I said, you know what, they're not paying attention to this. What I will say is from a bank, a prime brokerage perspective,
yeah,
or custodian, which are the people that are holding the money of the hedge funds technically, and also giving them leverage, right? Giving them, if I give you $10 million, I probably get to trade at least 20 million, probably up to 50 million because I get what's called leverage and I get to trade based on that money. Obviously,
right.
the first money I lose is my own,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
But
yeah,
in looking at that, I always found that if there was an error, just normal errors, and errors happen, right? If I do a
yeah,
trade with Morgan Stanley,
yeah,
I send my trade into my prime broker, and Morgan Stanley sends their trade into kind of cyberspace to match.
yeah.
When things don't match, it's called a break.
Right. Okay.
And when breaks were not in my favor,
Yeah.
they paid a lot more attention to them.
Mm.
Meaning, I would notice that if one of my guys booked a trade incorrectly and booked a price that it made us, God forbid, have a margin call or a day trading call at 6 a.m. the next morning, emails in bright red capitals would be coming through the system. Um, But what I found is when there was an error in my favor,
Mm.
nobody cared.
Right.
And then I realized as we were circumventing and taking assets out of the platform, which gave me less to use, there were some days I needed more assets than I had simply because there were now less there,
Right.
that I could create a break in my favor to
Right.
give me 5 million more dollars for the next day because when trades settle, at least in that time, now they're almost getting now to what's called T plus one, meaning
Yeah.
if I do a trade today, it can settle tomorrow.
Right. Okay.
When I was doing it, it was T plus three, meaning
Right.
you had 3 days to correct a break because the money was going to move on the third day.
Okay.
So I knew if I created a break in my favor and I didn't correct it the next day, but I did it the day after, they still allowed me to use that mistake in my favor in my trading.
I've got you. Yeah.
So I would create breaks in my favor because they weren't paying attention to something that gave me money. They were only paying attention to something that might put them or the bank at risk if I was losing money. So that was one thing where in the day to day it kind of meant nothing.
Yeah.
But over time, I said, you know what, I need more money tomorrow. Why don't I just create a break, give myself some extra money tomorrow, correct it towards the end of the day? And I also realized that that system that they used to monitor it, they would not refresh the system. Meaning, if I corrected something, if I was like, "Hey, you're right, that trade was $10 and not $100,"
Yeah.
um, they would. I would say, "Do you want to rerun the reports so I can see them?" They would be like, "No, as long as you corrected that one trade, we're good."
Right.
So I knew that they weren't refreshing the system. So
Okay.
I knew that they, again, it was just that they went one layer in the onion
Yeah.
instead of three, and the wrong people at the wrong moments will take advantage of those. The systems can be, and you and I have this discussion and laugh about it all the
Yeah.
time. Investigation Engine is a great system. It's
Yeah.
great for compliance. It is a frontline system that I think forget about medium size, large size, every small business, especially from the price point you're at,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
we'll talk about after this podcast. Not that I'm going to tell you to raise your prices, but I love what you have for the value you give guys.
Yeah.
but it's all up to who's sitting in front of that system.
Yeah.
And you can have rules. You can have like I've had people at symposiums and conferences sit in front of me and tell me how the AML and the rules and everything are the best in the world in the United States. No
Uh,
one comes close. And I always say, that's great. But
mm,
the people you have enforcing those are horrible, and that's why it's on the news every day. It's
yeah.
not because you don't tell people what to and what not to do and what to look out for. If you don't have a person in that seat that's actively going to implement it and enforce it and take it up the chain, down the chain, however it is, and you don't have a company behind you that is willing to tell maybe a large customer,
Yeah.
potential customer, that like the bouncer does at 3 a.m., you don't have to go home, you just can't stay here.
Yeah.
You're not willing to tell them we don't want your business.
Yeah.
You're gonna have a problem no matter what system you have in front of you.
It's interesting you say that because just before I came on this call, a client had come to me and said, "We've got a failure on a passport on your system. Is there something wrong with it? Is there something wrong with the system?" And I said, "Are you sure there's not something wrong with the passport?" Because
Right.
to start thinking
Right.
about, I've run,
It's
it's absolutely
it's
fine.
the reason they got your system, but they are all ready to criticize the system first,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Um,
that's typically kind of where it goes, especially if the customer comes from a high pedigree. And look, I was in the industry for 20 years before I started to do things
yeah.
that were not good and I
Yeah. Yeah.
started to break the law.
Yeah.
I had credibility.
Yeah.
So I had them at hello,
Yeah.
right? All the AML people, what they did is they wanted my business first.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that mentality, I mean, just go ask TD, right? 500 million in money laundering, that's not revenue, right? 500 million moving. What did
Yeah.
they make off that? If they made $1 million,
Yeah.
it's a lot. What do you make on fees of money moving through your accounts and fees? Who knows?
No.
But for that 500 million moving through their accounts, they decided they now have over 4 billion in fines and huge headline risk, which hasn't been calculated. How many CFOs left TD
Mm.
because of that issue, right?
Yeah. 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 It's incalculable sometimes. People think about in sort of about a minutiae about a fine, but it's actually much bigger than that. But so yeah, that was really good. So what about a real world example then, where you can talk about maybe there was a robust control or seemingly a robust control and it failed, and why did it fail? Aside from what you've just spoken about, is there something?
Yeah, no, and I wish I could say there was only one, but
Yeah.
obviously the example I just gave you would be the first one if I hadn't
Yeah.
already
Yeah. Yeah.
told you. But
Yeah.
the second one is that from a risk perspective, here's somewhere someone in the seat, if it's the right person, probably could have stopped something that I was doing early. So again, when you are diminishing the capital in your account,
Yeah.
but you're still doing your same day-to-day business and everything is going fine.
Yeah.
Like in my first situation, you sometimes need more money than you have or that you used to have, but don't have anymore because
Yeah.
you're now I was sending money to other companies to try to get the returns that I was getting on my platform because more money on my platform wasn't going to get me more
No.
returns. It was
No.
diluting returns.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I put them in private equity and was hoping to have a good return. So as I was taking money off the platform, um, we would have days where the platform that I was running would need a significant amount of capital. We ran probably the largest IPO platform in the United States at the time.
Yeah.
So when there was a large IPO or initial public offering day and they were offering us a lot of stock,
Yeah.
sometimes with that, they would also offer what's called a secondary, which are existing companies that are raising money and also offer their shares.
Right.
So I could have some days where I knew on Thursday, man, I was going to be to the hilt and my leverage was going to be to the hilt.
Yeah.
So I knew that there was a risk protocol called time and tick. I
Okay.
don't know if you're familiar with it,
No.
but what
No.
it is that risk is looked at as open risk, meaning if I buy 10 million of Apple,
Yeah.
after that buy, I'm open on $10 million of risk, right?
Yeah.
Apple could go to zero
Yeah.
and I have 10 million in risk.
Yeah.
If I book all my buys in the morning at 9 a.m., which is what happens when you get initial public offering stock, they give it to you pretty
Right.
much before the open.
Yeah.
I would have all that open risk. I realized that on the days that I had large trading, if I would not book my buys early,
Yeah.
and then once I've sold the stock, I would book systematically. Sometimes I would break up the trades. If I had a huge trade of $50 million, I would break it up into 10 trades of 5 million.
Right.
And I would book a buy of 5 million, a sell of 5 million, a buy of 5 million, a sell of 5 million. So instead, now I had open risk of 50 million at one point,
Yeah.
but I made it look like I never had more than 5 million open risk.
Right.
I would book the buy and the sell, circumventing the system, right?
Right.
Because I knew the system was going to look at things when they're open. So
Yeah.
I would close what I wanted to close before opening and never come close to my day trading call value. Now, the people I'm doing the trade with that I bought 50 million with clearly had to look at this and say, why in the world is he making all this extra work and booking 20, 10 trades or 20 trades instead of one?
Yeah.
But they were making a little bit more commission on those individual trades.
Right.
And my prime broker, who also gets all the trades, who could have been like, wait a second, you did all these trades at the same price with the same place. They got an extra ticket charge for every trade I did. So if I did one, they made considerably less than me doing 20.
Right. Okay.
So they never said anything. No one ever questioned why I would be doing something that seemed so much more difficult and had my risk profile so much lower. But if someone was one more layer in the onion, if I was in that seat, probably if you were in that seat,
Yeah.
if anybody that was actually paying attention was in that seat, they could be like, you know what? Maybe they had 50 million in an open trade and they're trying not to show it. No one ever questioned it, but everybody benefited more financially from it. And I always feel that that was part of the reason why it never it never came to fruition.
But is there also something in that that you mentioned earlier on about credibility? So the fact that the assumption was Mark knows what he's doing, we've got to trust him. Was that part of it, do you think?
I think it's part of it, but again, because it didn't incur a loss,
Hmm.
it
Yeah.
was simply a process related, right?
Yeah.
And someone familiar with time and tick needed to say, like, what does this do? What is this? How does this benefit him? He's paying, no one even called me up and said, Mark, this is costing you more money. At the very worst, even if it's not from compliance and risk, as a client, they should call me and say, I can save you, thousands of dollars a day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, because you're doing these trades. Why don't we roll them all up and make it one trade?
Yeah.
Because now, if there's a break, God forbid, you probably break on 30, 40 trades,
Yeah.
right? And the
Yeah.
break sheet is 2 pages long,
Yeah.
and you don't break on one. So there were so many reasons that had nothing to do with anything where at least it could have been questioned.
Uh,
Um, no one got there in the 8 or 9 different aspects they could have come to me. Hey, you want to save money? I want to save you time. Um, this is a lot of trades. It creates more breaks. Besides the fact where like, is this is this risk related? Like, are you trying not to,
hmm.
nobody even called the broker I did the trade with to find out if they could get a time the trade was done. Because if they could go look at the trade ticket and find out that my buys were done with the broker at 9 a.m. and
Hmm.
my sales were done at 12:30 p.m.,
Yeah.
um, it would also let them know that there was open risk that wasn't being reported correctly, so
Hmm.
that uh, the risk reports could then show my open risk correctly. They just, like I said, they decided to do the what I like to call in compliance the matador defense.
And assumedly there's a financial benefit to you to doing it that way.
Well, there was a financial benefit, but all, in more so, it was I didn't have enough money to justify a $50 million trade.
Right.
I
Okay.
had to break it down to keep my open risk probably less than 20, 25 million. So I did it at 5 or 6 million because I had other trades that I would be booking. I also had open positions
Yeah.
that I would keep at all times. So the idea was is that I knew a number every day when I came in that I
Yeah.
could not have open risk more than that number.
I see.
And
Okay.
it was a very important number for us.
Yeah. And that's about it's a bit about people not questioning people. I think the bit about we've got a question about actually about organizational culture. Um, but how do you think methods have changed? Now we've got AI and deepfake, um, and that's gaining a pace. And every single day I open up LinkedIn or the news and I see something that's happened about AI, etc. How's that changing the landscape in terms of fraud?
Well, I think that let's just talk about the working culture.
Okay.
I think that the people who are committing fraud do it 20 hours a day.
Right.
I think they implement game theory.
Yeah.
I think they are looking at it as the long game.
Right.
I think they are creating identities and websites and things to circumvent things 8 months ago, 2 years ago. I think they have a pool of information they go to that they try to age on purpose to try to help circumvent certain systems, right?
Right.
So I think that they are working in a way that becomes very tough if the people sitting in the compliance chairs are doing traditional 8 hour days with a couple of coffee breaks and an hour and a half
Mm.
lunch. And if they're really only doing 5 hours of fraud prevention versus 20 hours a day of people who live, breathe, and have made this their their Super Bowl,
Yeah.
I think it is very tough to combat where they're always going to be a couple of steps ahead unless, again, you have some right basic systems in place,
Yeah.
and then you have the right human beings there that are willing to kind of be diligent as far as the information they find.
Yeah. Because crime is a 24/7 business, isn't it? And you've hit on a great um, issue there in terms of the availability of fraud teams, the traditional working day. And I bet that's pretty much everywhere. And,
Every day was my Super Bowl when I was doing bad things.
yeah,
I would be going to bed at 2 a.m. and trying to think of how the next day was going to go, planning 2 weeks ahead, 3 weeks ahead,
yeah,
trying to give little keys now so that when I ask for something or ask to do something 3 weeks from now, it's
yeah,
already been in the conversation. Nothing's new. Don't make anything a surprise.
yeah,
Test things. Do a small trade and see if they catch it. Do
yeah,
a larger trade and see if they catch it. That's just innocuous. But the whole thing is testing, and I always feel, again, to use I'm going to be 56 years old, right? So I'm going to use analogies, and I'm hoping everybody will get it or
yeah,
Google it. But to me, right now, the technology for fraud and fraud prevention is like the Jetsons. Okay, the Jetsons
mm,
was a
yeah, I remember.
great cartoon, took place in the
Yeah,
future.
yeah,
But I do feel that the best way to start to counteract this is a mixture of you have to be the Jetsons, right? You have to be George Jetson. You got to have Elroy, but Elroy needs to marry someone from the Flintstones. And you need to
yeah,
go back to prehistoric times and
yeah,
slow things down,
yeah,
and they both need to have a child.
yeah,
That child is perfect for combating the Jetsons aspect and uh, the technology, advanced technology aspect of fraud. You
yeah,
need to be able, a bank needs to be able to say, your wire's not your wire's going out later. We're doing due diligence.
yeah,
Everybody needs to be willing to tell a client that things are getting slowed down for their benefit
yeah,
and that everything does not have to happen in a nanosecond.
exactly.
That speed of transactions and that speed of clearing things and that pressure that the people who are doing the due diligence are all in their own mini episode of Mission Impossible with a fuse going down before their client gets angry, their wire didn't go out.
Yeah,
even before they hit the send button
yeah,
is also part of the problem. And that the whole system needs to be able to slow down, and clients need to understand that there is a correlation between a little bit extra time for due diligence
yeah.
and fraud prevention.
No, it's absolutely bang on. It's about taking care and time to review. Right, they're a sort of saying in the police, and I'm going to go off piece a little bit, but they had this mentality in the radio or the control room: clear the queue, clear the queue, clear the queue. And it was about response times. It wasn't anything to do with the quality of dealing with that call. So you're there, you've got, are you free? Are you free yet? Are you free yet? And that's the way we are. Everything's on about 100 mile an hour. So yeah, completely get that one. Yeah, no, that's really good. So you touched on organizational culture. Is there anything you want to add there in relation to enabling or preventing fraud by the right or the wrong culture in a business or an organization?
Sure. I've touched on it, but most importantly, again, let's use investigation engine as a symbol, right?
Yeah,
If companies have investigation engine, it's only going to be as good as the person you have in that seat.
yeah.
The hiring, and here's the issue. The person that is doing that, are they a entry level employee? Are
Mm,
they a mid-level employee? Well, maybe is the role being treated as the place to be from and not the place to be at,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Is it do your time here and then this is where you want to be or where you don't want to be? And I think that during the interview process, you can find out if someone has a passion for fraud prevention
Yeah,
or if they're using it as a stepping stone to whatever the next department or next role that they want.
yeah,
And you have to incentivize the person in that seat to do the right thing.
yeah,
You also need to uh, advertise loudly the repercussions
yeah,
for not doing that job correctly
yeah,
and what you look for. I don't think enough firms talk about a lot of the basics of their fraud prevention. And I don't mean giving bad guys the keys to the castle. What you don't want to say is, hey, we put our car alarm here, right? So it lets the guys know that they go directly there if they want to disconnect a
yeah,
car alarm.
yeah,
That's not what you want to do. But you need to let your employees know what your intentions are for someone in that seat. You need to let them know that if you circumvent or even seem like you're not doing your job, you're technically going to be treated like someone who's trying to circumvent from the outside. So the
mm,
idea is
mm,
you need to be really on top and great at what you do,
yeah,
but you want to tell the people on the outside and advertise the robustness of your processes.
yeah,
And for that, I mean, look, if you're a bank or you're someone you have AML, if you are not out there touting your AML processes and procedures, it's just like, I mean, we were just talking, I was just making an analogy about a car. At
mm,
the end of the day, if I just put a connected to a battery blinking red light in my car so that someone can see it, they're probably going to the next car.
yeah,
So sometimes prevention is not catching them. That's catching them is after the fact. You already let them
yeah,
in, right?
yeah,
It's proactivity and reactivity.
yeah,
But if you can put up enough notice
yeah,
that people go somewhere else, I have to say that has to be part of your model. And you may say, well, are you really preventing anything? Well, you're not preventing anything if you don't catch them till they take money.
no, not
Okay?
at all. Yeah,
You have to start with them not being in your house,
yeah,
right? Like
yeah,
that's the idea is
yeah,
make them try the neighbors next door and
exactly.
then have a robust procedure to catch the people who may have slipped in,
Yeah,
but catch them soon enough before they can do significant damage.
no, wholeheartedly agree. I'm a big fan of crime prevention. I have been for many, many years. And during training, I'll often give the example of you've got your traditional burglar stood at two houses, outside of two houses. One's got an alarm, it's got CCTV, it's got really strong windows and doors. The other one, windows are open, there's no alarm, all that sort of stuff. Where they're going to go? But I think you're right about the messaging as well. I cannot recall ever seeing anything on a company website about robust AML and anti-fraud. They talk about how good they are, in terms of, we'll look after you as a customer, and quite rightly so. But I can't recall ever seeing anything about, criminals go away or a message like that. We will not deal with those sorts of people, because I think they're scared of doing that. But yeah, really good, really good.
Look, the biggest issue I have, and look, even during my situation,
Mm.
nobody really came to me and said, "Show us how the sausage is made."
Really?
Give us like even the two questions you've asked me where I told you how I did what I did in certain
Yeah.
situations. Nobody, no banks have really come to me. Now when I speak, I offer it, but
Yeah.
sometimes when you're speaking with, like I said, even on this on this podcast,
Yeah.
there may be compliance officers in all different industries.
Yeah.
Sometimes if I get into how it happened in the hedge fund industry, I don't want to put everybody to sleep. I'm more talking about the processes, right?
Yeah.
But no one said, show us how you did what you did. And that's why I get so many opportunities in order to speak because the people that get it want to hear
Yeah.
the actual like this is what happened. I didn't just go kick in the door and do it like a
Mm.
caveman,
No.
but it's all stuff that if you're proactive, you can stop it. But to me, fraud prevention is the term that I try to um, wave the flag for.
Yeah.
But I do think that a lot of the fraud prevention industry people are about like even when you're dealing with CFE, I always joke around with them and say like I hate the fraud triangle. I
Oh,
don't I don't
yeah.
like I don't like it because it is a retroactive backwards looking aspect, and once you find out how someone rationalized it and the opportunity, once you find out all that, it doesn't give you any information to stop
Mm.
someone today. We're all snowflakes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
My reasons are not going to be someone else's reasons.
No.
Bernie Madoff did not do it the way I did it, and we didn't
Yeah.
do it the same way. Knowing how we slept at night doesn't help us. There needs to be a fraud prevention like rhombus, and it needs to be compliance,
Yeah.
right? It needs to be a compliance due diligence aspect.
Yeah.
It needs to be a procedures and systems prevention, right? You've
Yeah.
got to build a moat. You got
Yeah.
to build a wall.
Yeah.
Um, and then you've got to implement it. And to me, that's the biggest issue is that fraud prevention is everybody's like, I caught somebody. Guess what? Nobody caught Bernie Madoff.
No.
Bernie Madoff caught himself
Yeah.
during the
Yeah.
down
Yeah.
market, and other than Harry Markopoulos, no one, no one was really there. And Harry Markopoulos was the one person that was able to take his trades in literally a half hour and say, in order for the money he has to have this performance
Yeah.
under these stocks, the volume didn't go through the market today.
No.
It didn't go through the market this month. It's impossible for him to generate these returns considering the vehicle that he says he's doing it with.
Yeah.
That was brilliant, right? That
Yeah.
was going three layers in the onion. There need to be more like Harry Markopoulos, not someone who just, waves their hand over it and says, my nothing kicked out of my reports today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes it's about history. It's about year over year. Um, and you need to look at everyone like this guy may be trying to do something wrong. You got to go backwards from there.
Yeah. I think you mentioned reverse engineering earlier on, didn't you? But it's that there's an acronym I use a lot on it. Any ex-cop will remember this from their time in the police, and I'm sure it travels across the water as well. Assume nothing, believe nobody until you check everything. And we've got to sort of engender that questioning mindset, I think, for compliance people. They've got to think like, yeah, we've said it's difficult to think like criminals, but how is somebody going to break my system? Um, so the final question then, it actually sort of circles quite neatly to what we just said. What's the one question professionals never ask but should when reviewing their sort of fraud prevention strategies? You might have part answered this already, in fairness.
No, and look, and I can speak specifically to my situation in one aspect, and
Yeah,
not every compliance officer is asking the same questions because they're not all. But I opened in that IPO strategy, I opened um, probably close to 500 accounts for 30 or 40 managers on my platform. We
Yeah.
opened accounts with every broker, right? They
Yeah.
all needed to get IPOs from every broker that you know would do an IPO, meaning Morgan Stanley, Goldman
Yeah.
Sachs, JP
Yeah.
Morgan Chase,
Yeah.
Allen and Company, whoever issues IPO stock and underwrites, we had to, each guy had to have accounts with all of them.
Right.
And they were all representing themselves as a family office, meaning a big money family,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
20 or 40 million trading their family money,
Yeah.
or they were ex hedge fund guys. But I had guys on the platform that drove a limo during the day.
Right.
I got their accounts open for them.
Yeah.
No one ever, because they were already on my platform, and my platform helped all these guys leverage a much smaller amount of money. They didn't have 20 million each. They may
No.
have had nothing each, but
Yeah.
I had 10 or 20 million on the platform that I allowed them to trade in order to do what they were doing.
Right.
No one ever asked them to see the money. No one ever said, give me a bank, give me from, they would all say, look, my money's here on this platform. And I would say, we kind of have, I can't really, I can't show you their account, but,
Yeah.
they're here, they're accepted to my platform, they're trading on my platform. They would create their whole kind of backstory on, whether they were an oil heir or inheritance. And, but no one, I would say maybe out of 500 accounts, 15 times individuals at one broker would be turned down. Goldman was a pain in the neck. Goldman was
Yeah.
a,
Yeah.
but yeah, no one ever said, "Oh, you have 20 million under management. Can I see the money?" No one.
Really.
Isn't that the first question you ask?
You'd have thought
Isn't you
so.
just say, "Look, we don't even need to have this conversation. I just need to know you have what you say
Yeah.
you say you."
Yeah. 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 Scary. Again, it's about checking. It's doing the basics, isn't it? It's. I'm
It
going.
is. The basics is where it all begins
Yeah.
and ends, usually.
And asking questions. I mean, you can't emphasize on asking the right sorts of questions. But no, that's been really, really good, Mark, and thank you for that. I'm sure all the audience will take a lot from it. But so anybody that wants to contact you for your services, how do they do that?
So if it's speaking, I mean, I have two websites, they go to the same place. One's MV
Yeah,
at markvaracchi.com. It's Mark with a K,
yeah,
Varacchi.com. And you can also get me at team at
right.
federalprisonconsultancy.com. But I'm on LinkedIn. If
On
you
LinkedIn.
if
Yeah.
you connect with me, I don't do much due diligence. I'll probably let you in. I'm just kidding. I don't have investigation engine for my LinkedIn. No,
Yeah,
but like I said, if you reach out to me on LinkedIn, that's probably an accessible place.
yeah,
And even like I said, if they're a client of yours, if they have any questions or anything, I'm an open book for them, and it's not about necessarily, I'm not monetizing this. I'd love to help anybody that's a client of yours, if
yeah.
they have other questions or there's anything I can do for them.
No, it's brilliant. You've got a unique skill set that's not in abundance out there, and I think you bring a lot of value to organisations. And I really appreciate you coming on our very first podcast as well. It might be we do another one at some point in the future, but no, thank you, Mark. And you know that well, I've offered you the opportunity to be on the forum anyway, and I'm sure people will be asking you questions.
I appreciate the opportunity, and again, I love what you're putting together. And
Thank
if we
you.
can get the person the right person in front of investigation engine will be a tough nut to crack. So great, congratulations in what you're putting together, and you really put the thought into it, and obviously your law enforcement background and all that
Yeah.
kind of always showed in it. So
Yeah.
I wish you all the best. And again, thanks for letting me chat with you today.
No, thank you.